In India, armed groups set fire to a centuries-old mosque and library. In Myanmar, since the 70s, 1 million Muslims have been displaced from their homes and forced to migrate. More than 200 Uyghur children were put into prison by China for receiving Islamic education. And now we see the events going on for months in Palestine. As you're listening to this, somewhere in the world, Muslims are being persecuted. Thousands of murders and destruction have been going on for years and years. There seems to be no end to these atrocities. You might ask, but brother, aren't we 2 billion Muslims? Why can't we protect our brothers and sisters? While there is no single state in the world with a population as large as the number of Muslims, why do we seem so few? When did we allow our voices to be silenced this much? How did we fall behind this far? There are things we cannot understand. Today, we will uncover the reasons for these questions, and we will get the solutions from the reasons themselves, because the answers are hidden exactly in these reasons. The conquest of Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, one of the turning points in human history, an event that closed one era and opened another. It is also one of the most critical events in the history of Islam. The famous Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, also known as Muhammad Fatih, wanted to conquer Constantinople with a great desire. However, conquering this place was not easy at all. Many nations had tried to take it several times, but no one had been able to succeed. Constantinople was a city with incredibly tough fortresses and an amazing defense structure. Something unprecedented had to be done to make this conquest, something that hadn't been tried before. The knowledge that was needed to achieve this was hidden somewhere in the world. The source of that specific knowledge was a master cannon maker, a Hungarian cannon master called Orban. He discovers an alloy, a mixture of metals, and with this unique alloy, he realizes that he could make very powerful cannons. During those times, Orban learns that Muhammad Fatih is going to besiege Constantinople. He's planning to sell this knowledge, but not to the Sultan. He first goes to the Byzantine Emperor. He says to him, "I'm a master cannon maker, and I've found a new type of alloy. With this invention, the cannonballs are much stronger and go much further. You can use it against them. I'm willing to give you this alloy, because I heard that the Ottomans are going to besiege this city. You can use it against them." The Byzantine Emperor gets very happy to hear this. He says, "Let's see the formula of this alloy." Orban says, "If you give me this much gold, I will give the parchment that the formula is written on." The emperor makes fun of him and says, "So you're telling us you're going to give us a piece of paper and want this much gold in return? Really?" And then he orders to his soldiers, "Throw this man into the dungeon." After a while, the news of this event reaches Muhammad Fatih. How? Because he has spies placed in Constantinople. They come and tell him what happened to the cannon maker. The Sultan gets excited and says, "Do whatever it takes to get that man out of the dungeon and bring him to me." The Sultan's men rescue Orban and bring him to the Sultan. Muhammad Fatih gives him twice the money he asked for and uses that alloy to build huge and deadly siege cannons. Then the siege of Constantinople begins. And thanks to this extremely destructive weapon, serious breaches and holes are made in the city walls, and eventually the city is conquered. Just think about it. Something that couldn't be achieved for centuries was finally accomplished through this weapon, through this means. Now let's consider the opposite scenario. If the Byzantine emperor had said to the cannon maker in the first place, "Okay, take these gold coins and make the weapon," the result might have been very different. Can you see the value of knowledge, effort, and struggle? There were a few things written on that piece of paper, but when you know it, you overpower and rule the other side. Did you know that what we call brain drain is not a new thing? Muhammad Fatih tried his best to gather talented individuals and knowledgeable people in Istanbul during his period. He invited them with compliments and gifts. For example, Ali Kuşçu, a genius in astronomy and mathematics. The Sultan spends a lot of money for him to come to his country. He invites him with his relatives and gives him 1,000 gold coins for each city he visits. Or let's go to another period. Have you ever heard of the Andalusian Umayyad state? It was a state that was at the top in terms of science and knowledge. A famous physicist named Pierre Curie says, 30 books remained and passed on to us from Muslim Andalusia, and we were able to split the atom with them. The other books were destroyed during the Mongol invasion. Pierre Curie also says, if half of the 1 million books that were burned had remained, we would have been traveling between galaxies in space by now. Have you ever heard of Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna? He's called the master of physicians. His books were taught in Europe as textbooks for 600 years. Let's look at Jabir ibn Hayyan. He's considered the founder of chemistry. And then there is Al-Zahrawi, who is seen as the father of surgery. There are many more names like these. When knowledge was in our hands, we, Muslims, were the authorities, pioneers. It was like this during the time of the Andalusian Umayyad state, during the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and so on. Remember the time of the Prophet ﷺ. During the Battle of the Trench, Salman al-Farisi gives an idea, just a few sentences, and Muslims start to dig trenches. This action changed the course of the battle dramatically. Many more examples can be given in this regard. On the one hand, a Muslim can choose to become a qualified, knowledgeable person, or he can choose to be someone who has never developed himself, who has never learned anything, who just eats, drinks, sleeps, and lives for pleasure. When Muslims become knowledgeable, competent, and qualified, the course of things start changing for the better. Because our religion itself tells us to have these qualities. Have you ever heard an ayah that says, stay away from knowledge? Or a hadith that says, just worship, do not research, do not improve yourselves? I mean, scientists are not considered witches in Islam, are they? On the contrary, our Prophet ﷺ says, seek knowledge even if you have to go as far as China. The Quran repeatedly encourages us to think and research, saying, do they not reflect? Do they not contemplate? The progress or decline of Muslims depends on following these commandments of Allah. Normally, when we say the laws of Allah, we think of harams and acts of worship, don't we? But Allah has two different systems of law. The first one is religious laws, which include the things that are forbidden, that are permissible, and worships. Halals, harams, ibadah, and so on. The second type of laws are the laws that Allah has set in creation, in the universe, also known as Sunnatullah. According to whether we obey the first type of laws or not, we see and receive the outcome after we die. But the consequence of not obeying the second type of laws is directly experienced in this world, and giving value to beneficial knowledge is one of those laws. So, as Muslims, what are the fundamental laws that cause us to be weak in our lives when we don't obey them? A great Islamic scholar, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, answers this with a precise statement. Our enemies are ignorance, poverty, and conflict. Against these three enemies, we will make jihad with the weapons of art, knowledge, and unity. We have already discussed what education and knowledge could do. Remember what Muhammad Fatih did. But what about the other two, poverty and conflict? What does Bediüzzaman mean by saying conflict? He means separation, division. There's an analogy that goes like this. When two heroes fight each other, even a child can beat them both. Meaning, when we as Muslims or Muslim majority states are in constant conflict with each other, when there's an atmosphere of dispute and coldness between us, when we do not unite and stand together, inevitably we will fall behind. And then, who would be the happiest when Muslims fight with each other? The enemies of Islam, of course. Why? Because when we are divided, it's easier for them to defeat us. Look, a Muslim individual or a Muslim community can make mistakes. We may see things that disturb us. But what is the solution when such things happen? Is it to become cold and distance ourselves from these Muslim individuals or groups? Is the solution to talk about them in a bad and destructive way? Is it right for one Muslim group to exclude, ostracize another Muslim group? No. Did you know that even Bedouins, the desert people of ancient Arabia, didn't used to do this? It is told that in the past there were two Bedouin tribes that used to be enemies to each other. They were at war. But when a bigger enemy from the outside came and attacked them, they made peace and fought the common enemy together. In other words, because of our internal conflicts and animosity, we are weakening ourselves. Nowadays, a lot of people are attacking Islam. Muslims are under constant attack by harams, by many different states, anti-Islamic posts in the media, harmful content on social media, and so on. At a time when we have so many enemies and need to stick together more than ever, how logical is it to be divided? So, not being able to see the bigger picture, not being aware of these threats, in other words, lack of education, leads to divisions. Meaning, the first item in Bediüzzaman's statement leads to the other one, conflict, division. So then, what happens when the lack of education and division come together? The third item emerges, that is, poverty. Have you ever thought how many of the world's famous brands are owned by Muslims? We got a very clear answer to this when the boycott lists against Israel were published. When our financial resources are not strong, our voices don't come out strong as well. I once heard an interesting observation. A researcher studying the Middle East says, I've seen that wherever poverty is high, crime rates automatically increase in direct proportion. So what does he mean by crime rates? Murders, thefts, cheating, etc. The poorer the country, the more crime there is. Because no one is born with a desire to commit crimes. If your financial situation is good, you don't feel the need to steal. You already have money and resources. When there's a problem, it's usually due to financial reasons. If you have the resources, you can easily solve your problems. If not, and especially if religious education is weak, people are more inclined to resort to violence and commit crimes. Of course, needless to say, poverty leads to low quality education, which then leads to division. So ignorance, poverty, and division, all three trigger each other. But their opposites also trigger each other. Meaning, if one improves, the others start to improve as well. Here we realize that Bediüzzaman's statement is an incredibly accurate observation, because these are exactly the things that make us fall behind. But can the course of all these events change? We all want to return to the glorious days of Islam, don't we? The days when Muslims were thriving and powerful, days when no society was allowed to suffer oppression under the Muslim rule, whether they were Muslim or not. You may be asking, is this really possible? My brothers and sisters, do not think of the fall season as the end of life. Remember, when a tree sheds its leaves, it's not because its roots have permanently dried up, but because of the season. When spring comes, the leaves of the tree reappear, turn green, and its flowers bloom just as before. Just like this, as Muslims, if we struggle properly, if we work hard enough, it is possible that spring will come after this fall. The problem is not that the other side is too powerful. The problem is our negligence, our lack of care. Instead of strongly holding on to the religion of Allah, we are moving farther and farther away from it. So the reason for the night is not the falling of darkness, but the withdrawal of the sun. Islam is the sun, and those who are enemies to it are the darkness. Just look at our past and look at now. Over time, they took the good qualities of Islam from us, and we took their bad qualities to ourselves. Israel, Myanmar, India are not in the position of oppressors because they work hard. They are in that position because we are lazy. Because some of us are not even aware of our obligation to pray 5 times a day. Because we spend hours consuming empty content on the internet. Because we are living our lives without a dream, a vision for the future of Islam. We boycott companies that support Israel, right? This is a good thing, but why can't we boycott our own nafs too? Our worldly comforts and desires? The devil is trying very hard to keep you away from struggling for Allah's deen and the Muslim Ummah. He is trying different methods on you. He is trying to make you lazy, make you live your life without any goals, show no effort, procrastinate, bring all kinds of excuses or whatever you call it. So why don't we boycott these things either? Maybe you're thinking, well, but I'm just one person. What can I change with just my efforts? Did you forget what your Rabb says in Surah Ali Imran, ayah number 140? If you have suffered injuries, they suffered similarly. We alternate these days of victory and defeat among people, so that Allah may reveal the true believers, choose martyrs from among you, and Allah does not like the wrongdoers. This ayah means days of victory and defeat follow one another, and in this way, people of strong faith, qualified believers emerge. So, Allah's system does not work the way you think. You're not expected to change everything in an instant. If we show the necessary sacrifice, patience and effort, Allah will elevate us. He will make us victorious. It's Allah who will grant victory. But except for a small group, we are not making enough effort to deserve this. When you put your head on your pillow at night, you're expected to say, Alhamdulillah, today I did this thing to serve Islam. You're expected to pray by saying, Oh Allah, make my tomorrow better than today. Doesn't your Lord say, Esta'adhu billah, قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاءُكُمْ. Say, O Prophet, what will my Lord care for you if not for your supplication? So you need to pray with your tongue, with your heart, your body, your mind, your wealth, your dream, your efforts, with everything you have. Because praying is not just done with the tongue. Taking the necessary actions and making sacrifices are also forms of prayer. If you don't take any action for Islam, Israel will kill another baby in Palestine, another mosque will be set on fire in India, another Muslim will be displaced from their home in Myanmar. If you don't take any action, another Muslim woman in East Turkestan will be forced to remove her hijab. Don't forget our biggest enemies: ignorance, poverty, and division. We will strongly hold on to our religion and take action against these. Are you asking, where do I start? How do I take the first step? But the reality is, we have already taken it, because the first step was to ask this question, and you have done it now. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. Then the second step is setting a goal. If you don't set a goal for yourself, no matter how eager or excited you are to do something, the excitement for it, your motivation will only last a week. Do you have any field of interest? Then get to an advanced level in that. Let the one who people look up to in that field be a Muslim. Do you have a talent for something? Find a way to use it for Islam, for Muslims. Do you have children? Raise them by making them love Islam. Teach them their religion. Do you have non-Muslim friends in your workplace, school, or neighborhood? Or do you have Muslims around you who don't practice their faith? Learn and practice your religion in the best way you can. Let your body language, the way you carry yourself, your life as a whole represent Islam to the outside. For example, set goals for yourself to learn your religion better. If you want to make a big improvement in Islamic knowledge in a short time, you can take advantage of the video series that we put together. In other words, whoever you are, do something against ignorance, division, and poverty. And when the time comes, let the major actors of Islam who will change the course of events emerge. And let them see a great crowd behind them that preserves and lives Islam, and become one of those good people. Let's end the video with a short story that will summarize everything we have talked about. A story that has been told for generations. Once upon a time, there was a carpenter that crafted a beautiful pulpit. The beauty of this pulpit became so famous that its fame spread throughout the region. It was such an amazing work of art that some people came and expressed their desire to buy it. However, the carpenter refused to sell it and say, "I have made this pulpit for Masjid al-Aqsa." But at that time, Jerusalem was under the control of the Crusaders, and they were very powerful. Those who heard his response said, "You're dreaming. How can this be put in Masjid al-Aqsa while Jerusalem is ruled by the Crusaders?" The carpenter said, "I'm a carpenter. What I can do is to make the pulpit. This is my duty. And when the time comes, a commander rises and conquers Jerusalem. And that is his duty." Among the audience, there was a child who was listening carefully to every word the carpenter was saying. These words penetrated his heart that was full of iman. Years pass, that child grows up, gathers his army, and conquers Jerusalem, and places that pulpit in Masjid al-Aqsa. In history, he is known as Salahuddin Ayyubi.